You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and joining me today, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, this will come out after Christmas for us, and you're there with your family, and I'm sure you guys have quite a few exciting things planned for Christmas time. But excited to see this Week 17 matchup with the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, that'll be a great game, and the Raiders have some stuff that can go down where they're still in the playoff hunt. So it's going to be interesting. I got it pulled up right here, actually. They needed a bunch of stuff to happen last week. It all happened. These 5 things to happen if the Raiders are to make the playoffs. They need to beat Denver. Not happening, so who cares? They need Baltimore to beat Pittsburgh. Pretty likely. Although Pittsburgh has more to play for, so we'll see. Houston needs to beat Tennessee again. It's possible. Indy beating Jacksonville. And they need to win by any of the teams, either the Patriots, the Chargers, the Lions, or the Bears. So it will be interesting to see what happens, but they're playing for it, and that means that hopefully the Broncos will have a chance. The Raiders will be playing for something. Broncos can kind of, just put their hopes and dreams to bed, because nothing's better than letting the Raiders down and making them sad. Happy holidays.
Yes. That is something that excites me, is that the Broncos can ruin somebody else's day, especially a Raiders team and Raiders fans. I will say it was kind of weird listening to that Chargers game there in LA. I mean, it sounded like a home crowd for the Raiders. So they got one extra home game to make up for their last game in Oakland being so terrible.
Yeah. Well, they should be booed either way. I mean, they're the Raiders, so they live for the boos. They are hated. They haven't been great in a while, but it's crazy how bad they are and how much I still really dislike them.
Yeah, me too.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I don't know, especially now that they got their coach back. It just makes it that much sweeter to beat Chucky.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about that to ruin his day makes it that much better. But it'll be an exciting game. I'm excited to talk about this. Our last Scout's Eye preview for the season. Man, that's kind of I don't know. Gives me another teary-eyed that we finished another season together, man.
It's just getting started, though.
Yeah. As
we talked about, I don't know if it was on the phone. I think it was on the phone before we started recording, but we are busy this time of year, but people are like, the season's ending. That means you can kind of relax, you can put your guard down, breathe a little bit. Oh, no. We are full steam ahead until April. April, after the draft is over, obviously recapping that, and then you have the stuff going on where it's the dead period in May, June, July. That's when it's pretty much break for us, which is nice, because that's when it's nice outside. We can go do hiking and fishing and doing whatever we can do outside. But, full steam ahead still, folks. We're not going anywhere, even though the season is going to be ending.
Exactly. So make sure that you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Nick. Well, and watching this Raiders team play, I guess it really makes sense why they are where they are. They are about average in everything. They're not downright terrible in anything, but they're also not great at anything either.
Yeah. The only thing I would say that I really like about their team is I really like the upside of their tight end duo. But other than that, it's pretty ho-hum. Oh, and Jacobs is a great running back, but done for the year. So ho-hum offense, ho-hum team. Well, maybe not even a ho-hum team, because the back seven of that defense is not good, but point stands.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they make the playoffs, any team that's playing them is going to be pretty excited that they got the Raiders.
Yeah.
There's many ways that you can attack them on both sides of the ball. And I found some very interesting stats about them that I'll get to here in just a second. But just taking a look at their offense. Right now, yards, they're ranked 14th at 356.1 yards. 24th in points per game, 19.9. And so, I mean, that brings us up to the red zone offense where they're 21st in the league, making sense why their yards are higher than their points. And it's kind of funny. I had a Raiders fan when Carr came into the league. They were a terrible offense, but somehow they always seemed to score touchdowns when they got to the red zone. They never made it to the red zone, but when they did, they scored. And they kept saying, oh, that's exactly why Derek Carr is going to be a great quarterback in this league. And not that he's terrible, but it's kind of one of those things start to level out and you start seeing a bigger picture, especially as more data comes into the picture. And for the Raiders, yeah, that red zone offense has just been terrible compared to the Broncos, who have the number 1 red zone defense in football.
Yeah. Yeah, the Broncos, that's hats off to Fangio and the defense there for being the number 1 red zone defense too. I mean, it'd be easy considering the injuries and some of the deficiencies they have in coverage in the back seven to not have that be the case. But man, that's a great sign of things to come in this coaching staff and this defensive scheme. So that has me really excited.
Yeah, me too. But one stat they are actually pretty high at as well. Third down offense, they are 5th in the league at 45%. They are actually worse than the Broncos at turnover differential, 17th at -2, which is kind of crazy to think that the Broncos are making their way back up that list. But another thing that kind of sticks out that's kind of like the Broncos actually, they are they are 7th in first half scoring at 13 points per game. They are dead last, tied with the Broncos in second half scoring at 6.9 points. So this could be a fireworks game in the first half and complete defensive battle in the second half.
Interesting. That'll be, I think that you can flip the narrative for the Broncos with Drew Lock here now, just because, and Scangro getting bigger and better as time is going on as well. But for the Raiders, not much is probably changing. If anything, probably more of the same with lesser talent because you're not going to have Jacobs and their really high paid right tackle, whose name is escaping me right now. Colt Miller is Trent Brown. There it is. Trent Brown on the opposite side is done for the season as well. So that will be, I think we'll see more of the same with the Raiders. So if the Broncos can survive the early onslaught, they've got a really good chance to win this game. And even then, we saw now that because with Drew Lock, Broncos can come back from a deficit in the fourth quarter even. So, man, gosh, I'm all positive vibes today. Maybe it's because I had a good lift this morning and all the endorphins are going. And we're recording this on Monday too, folks. It's important to know, Carl. Preacher, busy. I got family stuff coming. We're getting it done for you guys so we can still be here for you when the podcasts come out and we can also still enjoy our family. Who says you can't have it all?
Boom. I like it. But, yeah, so it is. They're kind of a weird team in some aspects. And like I said, pretty average and really struggling. And like I said, with the Broncos, because of Drew Lock, it does change a lot of things. You got to change how you look at the Broncos pre Drew Lock to post Drew Lock. I mean, I think it was, Nikki,
Jablava.
Yeah. Where she had put out that the Broncos with Drew Lock compared to before, they're averaging at least 7 points more per game with him in the line.
And that's with the dud of the Chiefs game, which in snow, Chiefs good defense. And the Chiefs held the Bears on the road last week, which not a great deep offense for the Bears, but the Chiefs going on the road and holding the Bears to 3 points, that made that 3 points for the Broncos look less. It made me worry a little less because I think, again, this Chiefs team is really starting to get hot at the right time. I think they have as good of a chance as anybody to win the Super Bowl. It's going to be interesting. I hope we get Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
Oh man, that would be fireworks for sure. But no, you're right. So it's without that game, if you take out that Chiefs snow game, the Broncos are averaging close to 27 points per game.
And they went like 18 games in a row without scoring over 24, and now they're averaging it. So, man, it's things are heading in the right direction, folks. It's positive vibes Monday. We're on that train. Victory Monday. Yes,
we are. It's very exciting times. But again, back to the Raiders here. They are 14th in passing yards per game at 236.4. They are 8th in quarterback rating, 101.3.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, I think if you go back, watch Derek Carr, this is one thing he's done a lot in his career. He has been very risk averse.
He's got that Alex Smithism in him.
I honestly, that might be his best comparison. A less athletic.
Not the athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit better deep arm. And part of this, I do want to say, is that the Raiders' wide receiver core is really not good. And that's an issue. I mean, they were supposed to have Antonio Brown, which, gosh, Antonio Brown was supposed to have Antonio Brown. I don't know if we can say that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a wide receiver core that really needs some work. Do love the tight end duo, as he talked about. Darren Waller killed the Broncos week 1. Hopefully, the Broncos have been much better against tight ends as of late. Travis Kelce is still going to get his, but I don't think it even matters unless you have like 2 All-Pro linebackers and a Derwin James like safety. Travis Kelce is still going to get his, but they've been much better, and obviously Foster Moreau on the other side. But the wide receivers, combined with Derek Carr's propensity to get rid of the ball quickly and not really be much of a gunslinger, makes this just not an explosive offense. So it makes the QB rating better. He's getting the completions. He's distributing the ball. If you had a great defense or a playmakers at wide receiver that could do some yak stuff, that'd be something. It's not how they're built right now.
For sure. And so, that's why they're 19th in passing touchdowns.
Yeah. So
all stats you have to kind of keep in perspective. Somebody could look at that and say, wow, Derek Carr's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. No, he's not the worst quarterback, but there's a reason that the Raiders are actually looking to move on from him. That there's been a lot of articles, especially over the last couple of weeks, that the Raiders are really going to be a player in the draft for looking for a quarterback. So then they do have the firepower with a couple of first-round picks. Wouldn't surprise me to see them try to trade up into that top 10 and get a guy like Tua, because that's just exactly what Chucky would do. Want to make that splash play that everybody's talking about.
And there was a lot of talk that they were infatuated and would have loved the opportunity to take in Kyler Murray in the last draft.
For sure.
So interesting. And thank you, Raiders. Chucky, he coached Drew Lock in the Senior Bowl, and I guess he didn't like enough what he saw, or maybe thought he already had a guy like that in Derek Carr. But appreciate you not taking our quarterback.
Well, I can't remember who I was listening to. They said that the Raiders actually really liked him. They just saw that they had other needs and thought, kind of like the Broncos, that they could be a playoff team if they got other guys. And so they kept passing, thinking that maybe he would fall to them, and if not, they wanted to fight for the playoffs. And it seems like a lot of teams kind of fell into that trap. And I think this is something that happens a lot around the league, is too often people get obsessed with their roster and thinking, I've created something great, when in the reality, it's not even close to that.
Odds are you're more likely closer to the middle. And the way you get out of that middle is if you hit on quarterback. And quarterback, there's no secret sauce. Honestly, the best thing you can do is continually go back to the well. So it's a lottery ticket kind of thing. We don't even know what Drew Lock's going to be yet, totally. And we're getting off topic here, but it's the end of the season. We're kind of reflecting a little bit. But
right.
It's really, it can open things up for the Broncos. And the fact that what Drew Lock has shown so far, and in a vacuum, probably you take Kyler Murray over him, but compared to Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins, and even that, Josh Rosen, 10th overall pick, he's looking really good. He's not Patrick Mahomes, he's not Deshaun Watson, who's honestly struggled a bit without Will Fuller on that offense. Let's call it as it is. Having a big playmaker like that opposite DeAndre Hopkins, you don't just need one good wide receiver, you need playmakers. So it's interesting, but gosh, can you imagine if the Raiders had traded up and gotten Drew Lock, and we're stuck here now probably watching Brandon Allen again?
Oh my gosh. This would not be
We'd probably be getting Justin Herbert. Honestly, that's probably what's happening, if that was the case.
Oh, for sure. And we would not be talking all excited about this upcoming season.
No, it'd be another offseason of debating other positions in the draft, but knowing in reality that you have to focus everything around quarterback. So I'm just #blessed that we don't have to go back down that rabbit hole for at least this next coming offseason.
Yes. This will be the first time since Peyton Manning that the Broncos have known at the end of the season who their 2020 or their next starter would be the next season. Every year they've gone in not knowing exactly who it was going to be till later in the year. Nice to have that. But the other area here, you already said Josh Jacobs not going to play in this game, but rushing yards per game, they are 13th at 119.7, 17th in yards per carry, 4.3. They do lean a lot on that run game because they do have that big offensive line in front of them. But we'll see how much that really matters without a Josh Jacobs in the lineup because he really destroyed the Broncos last matchup.
He's a 3-down back. He brings as much as a runner as he does as a receiver. So it's unfortunate for them that they lost him for the season. But he's a good one. I still don't believe in taking running back round one unless you're a team that was in the AFC Championship last year and think you just a running back away from getting over the top. But he's a good player for them, and he changes their offense. So they're very much neutered. And if the Broncos can slow down those tight ends, I think they got a pretty good chance. And the Raiders, we're talking a lot about the offense. Their defense is probably even worse.
For sure. Yeah, they are 20th in yards per game given up, 27th in points per game allowed at 26.9. So another game where you could see the Broncos score that 27 or more points, really close out the season on a high note for the offense. They're 28th in third down percentage allowed at 44%. One area that they actually are pretty good, they don't get a lot of penalties. They're third in the NFL at only giving up 702 yards in penalties this year.
That's not very Raiders-like.
I know. What's going on here? But they are 31st in quarterback rating allowed, 104.5. So just another game that sets up well for Drew Lock to go out there and have a good game. They're 26th in sacks this season, so they can't get after the quarterback a whole lot. They are pretty decent against the run game, though. So Phillip Lindsay trying to go for that 1,000 yards. He's going to have to earn it in this one. They're 9th, only giving up 100 yards per game, and 6th in yards per carry at 4.0.
Yeah, they old school Gruden 90s football, right? Stop the run, run the ball. Pass game is what it is. So hopefully it'll be a good game for Drew Lock to end the season on a high note. I'm sure it'll be a topic discussed not only on here but throughout the Denver airwaves. Did we get a false positive on Drew Lock because the Texans / Lions / Raiders have not very good defenses, putting it lightly. But either way, you can only play who's in front of you, and if the Broncos can close out and Drew Lock looks good down the stretch and the offense looks better and better, hard not to feel really good about this offseason and the projection of 2020. So that all comes down to, win-loss probably doesn't matter as much, but great. Gosh darn, it'd be so much nicer to end the season 4-1 with Drew Lock and knocking the Raiders out of the playoffs officially.
Man, would be perfect. Although, if the Broncos win, did you know that they move up to number 2 in the division?
Interesting. So that would change their schedule dynamics completely.
Yep.
So they'd be stuck playing is it the AFC East next year?
Yes.
Oh, man, so that means that they get the Bills again instead of the Jets / Dolphins?
Well, they have the AFC East no matter what.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, they have the AFC East no
so
matter
it'd be they'd get the Titans.
The Steelers? And the Steelers.
And the Steelers, yeah.
Interesting. In comparison to the Colts and the Browns, which is who they had this year. Well, they already had the Colts anyway, but interesting. You know what? I'm not going to think too far ahead. If I can't think about or at least vocalize so much the draft implications and not care about that in my heart, then the second or third team, meh. Especially if you have to play the Bills anyway. That's the big one. There's a big difference between the second and third team in the AFC East. But in the North and the South, not as much. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break, folks. Going to try to keep this a little bit snappy for you guys on this Saturday or Sunday that you're listening to this. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alrighty, and welcome back to the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler. Due to the holidays, we are recording this actually on Monday the 23rd. You guys should be getting this on, whatever day that Saturday ends up being, the 28th, I believe. So obviously things can change since then. Maybe the Broncos get a ding, an injury, maybe another type of flu plague, bubonic death goes over the locker room, so things will change. But we're just going as of we know right now on Monday the 23rd. We're now on to Coach's Corner here. Carl, I'll kick it off to you. You get the Broncos offense versus the Raiders defense, and good times.
Yeah. This should be a fun matchup for the Broncos for sure. Right now, let me just point to, I guess, I would say the strength of this defense that they have here. I would say their edge rushers are pretty decent. I mean, Max Crosby, I think he has 8.5 sacks on the season.
he's been very good for a 4th-round pick. All the traits and the production have translated despite playing at a small school. So he's interesting.
Yeah. He's played more like their 1st-round pick should be playing, Clelin Ferrell. And Ferrell's been getting a little bit better as the season progresses here. And
can we rephrase that? 1st-round pick is true, but that's like if he was the 27th overall pick, you'd be fine with this. The 4th overall pick.
Good
Not
point.
what you want.
Right. You're expecting, Broncos with Von Miller, you're expecting.
You want Bradley Chubb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Brad Chubb, great. Yeah. So they haven't got that for sure. But really, if you're looking at this defense, you're just not seeing much strength at all. Their cornerbacks have struggled. Their linebackers have really struggled.
They suck. They suck.
Mm-hmm.
Bad.
And, their defensive line is more geared towards stopping the run than actually getting after the quarterback. So, you got like Jonathan Hankins as their nose tackle. He's been pretty good, obviously, against the run, but he's not going to offer a whole lot in the pass game. So,
yeah,
this is one of those games. I wouldn't mind the Broncos really going a ton of 2 tight end sets, just to kind of help with those edge guys, get them a little bit chipped. But also then you have your tight ends taking on those linebackers. You're getting them in their base defense, their 4-3 defense, and forcing worse players on the field.
I love it, Carl. I got goosebumps. That's what it's all about, baby. Keep going.
Yep.
Keep going, baby.
And so, yeah, and that sets up perfect where you got your extra blockers in to help in the run game. And we already talked about it with Beck, with Hireman, with Fant. They've all been blocking much better here, especially to close out the season. Get those guys on the field. Get your Phillip Lindsay, your 1,000-yard rusher. But then also you have the play action out of that where you're going to get those guys sucking up, for the run game and then beating him over the top there with Hireman and Fant. I just think that sets up so perfect where it just makes easy reads for Drew Lock. And even there, this is also another game where I think Sutton can have a really nice bounce back game. They don't have any cornerback that can keep up with him. There's nobody in that secondary that really scares me matched up against Sutton. So again, you can have some big plays going down the field to him. Just really, again, it's just a lot of making them have to chase you because they just don't have the speed. They don't have the athleticism. They don't have the great players on the field to really keep up with you. And this is why teams have been able just to score at will against this team. They are just downright terrible. Even the Chargers game, as bad as the Chargers are, they still move the ball like crazy. Guys were wide open. And so, again, for the Broncos, I think this sets up really well for them to have a really strong game. The run game, it might stall there a little bit early on, but this is one of those games you also commit to it and say, okay, we're going to keep running at you because we're going to make you creep up and think we're going to keep trying to run this football. And then that's when you hit them with that play action, beat them over the top, get the big plays, move the pocket a little bit here and there. Obviously, Drew Lock showed this last game just how great he is when he's throwing on the run. Even when he's running to the left, that was one of his best throws. Downright impressive. That is not
Mahomes-esque.
Yeah, that is not an easy throw one bit. But you're taking their 2 playmakers out of the game with having those tight ends in. And again, like I said, you're just kind of keeping them on their toes. Are they passing? Are they running? What are they doing? And that's the nice thing the Broncos have right now with having 2 tight ends that can catch and block. And that's what you're trying to set up in this NFL system. And I think this is a great game for the Broncos on offense. I think they're going to be able to move the ball at will.
I think so too, because I'm looking at this injury list for the Raiders. I look at the depth chart and then obviously the injury list. Nick Nelson, cornerback, knee injury, out for week 17 versus Denver. He was playing, actually out some flashes this year. Rookie, maybe second year, but out of Wisconsin. Trayvon Mullen, their 2nd-round pick last year, had flashes out of Clemson, out for week 17 at Denver. And then LaMarcus Joyner, questionable for week 17 at Denver. So, man, this might be a game where Drew Lock if the Broncos defense is not able to play at least a little bit of control, I think the Broncos could throw the ball around the yard. And you have another game where obviously Cortland Sutton could do some stuff, but even Tim Patrick, Deshaun Hamilton, Noah Fant. This is a game where the passing offense has literally no reason besides game flow for them to not absolutely kill it. The Raiders offense, not great. They are very dinged up and injured as well. Josh Jacobs out for the year. We have also my guy from last draft, Foster Moreau, out for the year. They have Colton Miller at left tackle right now. They lost Trent Brown at right tackle, pectoral injury for the year. So, man, not a great team. I'm not very afraid of them. I think the biggest thing is just not letting the guy who beat you last time in Darren Waller, really good athletic tight end, wide receiver, Georgia Tech, moved to tight end, beat you for the big play. If you can do that, I don't respect this team enough to do much else. I mean, Zay Jones, underneath guy, has not really lived up to much of anything. Tyrell Williams, been a massive disappointment for what they've signed. Hunter Renfrow has done some stuff, but if Hunter Renfrow beats you, then you know what, you tip your cap, because that guy, good slot receiver, but not really much of a difference maker. He's just doesn't have the athletic traits to be a guy who's going to kill you. So really, I'm not much afraid of this. I think if you just play solid run defense, keep everything in front of you, and do what you can to limit Darren Waller. This isn't Travis Kelce we're talking about. This isn't George Kittle we're talking about. This isn't Rob Gronkowski. He's a good receiving tight end. He's a good playmaker, but he's not that guy. So I think it's simple. You execute your defense. You keep it in front of you. You get after Carr, and he's going to get rid of the ball quick. You don't get frustrated by that. You come down, you tackle in space like you have been all season, doing better and better in that, keeping guys in front of you and rallying to the ball. And if you can do that with good run defense, which they've been showing somewhat, I mean, they're obviously dinged up in the defensive front specifically. Mike Purcell is probably more of a jag than a difference maker, but Draymond Jones, a solid player. Maybe we'll get DeMarcus Walker back and get some stuff there. But the linebackers playing very well against the run. Todd Davis, always underrated in that regard, but he's doing well there, and Alexander Johnson as well. So I think it's really, you just go out there and run your defense and keep it in front of you and execute, and you should walk away with a win, because there's not much on this team that makes you worried. And the offensive line is good. Richie Incognito, the left tackle, left guard, everybody knows about the bullying incident in Miami, but he's been playing as one of the best guards in football this season. They have Rodney Hudson. It's a good offensive line. Gabe Jackson's still there. Colt Miller has actually been playing better this season, but David Sharp is the backup right tackle. He has a lot of issue with speed rushers, and they're just not explosive. So, and with how quickly Derek Carr gets rid of the ball, it's almost like they don't take advantage of having a better offensive line. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like they're limiting themselves from explosive plays because the offensive style is like it's called and executed like if the offensive line was just a complete sieve. And that's not the case. So DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, those are some explosive runners. Rod Smith, okay. They're fine, but it's not Josh Jacobs. It's just I don't see any punch to this team outside of Darren Waller on the offensive side. So if they can stymie him up and just go out there and execute, they should be fine.
And I will point out,
that's simple.
Richie Incognito did miss the game against the Chargers too, with an injury.
Yes,
so
he is questionable.
Yep. So again, they're pretty banged up on that offensive line, just like the Broncos. So it's not going to be the same offensive line the Broncos saw earlier in the season that just ran over them.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs is questionable with a shoulder injury. He might be in just because it's playoffs. I'm guessing it's one of those things where if there's a chance they can go in, they will put him out there for a limited carry to see how he's going. But there's a possibility that the Raiders will be eliminated. This is a 3:00 kickoff, probably. I'm assuming.
Yes.
3:00 Central. Excuse me, guys, for your Denver listeners. 2:00 for Mountain Time. But Incognito and Jacobs at this point are questionable. So we'll see. But it's just they're really banged up, and it's all happened like in the last few weeks too, which is pretty crazy. But it'll be interesting to follow. So all right, well. One more break. We'll be right back, folks. Do not go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler. A little bit shorter episode today. We're recording 2 in a row. It's Monday over here in Iowa and Carl in Kansas, but it's a victory Monday, so we're all riding high and excited about the holidays too. A great time of year. Carl and I just did a Christmas movie draft in the last podcast because you know what? It's week 17. The Broncos are out of the playoffs, and we're riding high, but it's still the holidays. We want to be a little bit of fun here. If that's not your cup of tea, you can always scroll past it and enjoy the rest of your day. But we want to bring a little bit of fun and personality to these podcasts as well, because you know what? They're our podcasts. So moving forward, though, Carl, it's the superlatives now. Not the longest section, but always fun to talk about. Week 17 versus the Raiders. The Broncos win if.
I think the Broncos win if. I'm going to give one of mine that I gave not too long ago. If they give up 3 or less sacks.
Three or less sacks.
Yeah, just because, again, the Raiders haven't been a great team at getting after the quarterback, but also with the Broncos' offensive line banged up, it's one of those, like you said, just because they did it in one game doesn't mean they're always going to do it in the next. And so if they really just implode in this game with all the injuries and everything else, I could see the Broncos offense having some struggles. It's the only way that I see the Raiders defense standing a chance is if that Broncos offensive line implodes in this one.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to go with the Broncos on defense for this one. I'm going to go with the Broncos win this game if they give us plays of 20-plus yards. Again, we hammered on this. Not the best Raiders explosive playmaking offense. Derek Carr gets rid of the ball quick, sometimes can limit that ability to create some explosive plays. It's going to come down to execution and discipline more than anything. And I think this is a game where the Broncos can really just control the pace. Even the back seven, even though the back seven's dinged up right now. They're missing Kareem Jackson. That's an area that I think that will be a big difference maker in this game if they can be overall. Carl?
Oh, okay, you're back now. Can you do yours again? It cut out pretty bad there.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no problem. Good one, Carl. I think I'm going to go with the defensive side on this things. I think that the Broncos, we talked about it, I really don't respect these Raiders' weapons outside of Darren Waller. And Josh Jacobs going to be dinged up, might not even go. I'm going to go if the Broncos give up 3 or less plays of 20-plus yards on defense, they're going to end up winning this game. That comes down to execution and discipline as much as anything.
I like it. Well, Broncos lose if blank.
I think the Broncos lose if they give up a special teams big play. Doesn't have to be a touchdown, doesn't have to be anything like that. They might even still win them. Let's say special teams touchdown. But I want to bring back to how disappointing the coverage units even have been for this team. Obviously, we like to harp on the punter. Colby Wadman not been the best this year, but kickoff and punt return coverage have not been great. Although, shout out to Deontay Spencer providing some explosiveness to the Broncos kickoff return game and punt return game, because that's something this team hasn't had. But coverage units have not been good enough. So I think Broncos lose if they give up, let's say, 2 explosive plays on special teams.
Okay. I'm going to go if they allow the Raiders to reach their average rushing yards per game, 119.7.
That would be a bad number for Denver.
Yes. I mean, the Raiders are absolutely going to try to establish the run game, whether Josh Jacobs plays or not. Broncos have been good at getting after the quarterback. It's been one of their specialties this year. They saw last time that they played, all they had to do was pretty much hand it off and pick up 4 or 5 yards every single time, wear down that Broncos defense, and, of course, keep the offense on the sideline. So if the Broncos give up 120 or more rushing yards, Broncos lose this one.
Alrighty, that's a good one. I'm going to go MVP now for the Broncos. After a kind of a quiet game last week, I'm going to go with Courtland Sutton. I think he's going to explode in this one. I think he's going to have a great game, and they're going to target him early and often and get him involved.
All right, I'm going to go Von Miller.
Okay.
I mean, he's got that easier matchup with Trent Brown out.
Are you sure he's going to rush from that side?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Even if he's rushing from the other side, I mean, the Raiders at offensive tackle, he's been okay there in Colton Miller, but he's not. He's actually kind of been playing worse the last couple of weeks. I've seen him getting beat more and more. And so I think either side, I think Von Miller goes into this game, has a couple sacks, almost gets himself to that 10-sack season. I really wish he could get there, that double digits, because he's played tremendously considering all that's happened to him this year. And he definitely deserves that 10-sack mark.
All right. The GOAT, if the Broncos end up losing in this one, I'm going to go with Trey Marshall. He did not look great this last game to me. Obvious drop-off between him and Kareem Jackson. And I could see him doing a stupid penalty or getting beat in a zone responsibility that gives up a big play that could end up being the difference maker in this game.
I'm going to go... Well, it's kind of hard to know who's going to start on the offensive line.
Yeah.
I was going to go one of them, but I just don't know who's going to be starting there. I guess I'm going to go Alexander Johnson.
Good pick.
I think, just his need to be there for the run game, and also just he can be picked on in the pass game. There were times Todd Davis actually did pretty darn good in coverage this last game, but I think the teams are trying to get Alexander Johnson one-on-one in certain situations. And so I could see him having a game where he really struggles. As you've already mentioned, they have some pretty good tight ends there for Oakland. And you don't want your linebackers having to try to cover those guys one-on-one.
Good call. And the unsung hero for me in this one, I'm going to go with Andrew Beck. I think the Broncos are going to try to control the game, and he's coming off a good week this past week. And also, we've talked about how horrific the Raiders linebackers are. I think you have a chance for Beck to pick those guys off, not only the run game, but if he can get isolated in the flats or even over the middle against a linebacker, it could be some big plays. And he's been pretty underrated in the second half in general, so I think it's tip of the cap to him overall, but I think he's got a chance to be the unsung hero and a win in this game.
I'm going to go for the redemption story. Isaac Yiadom.
Okay.
This last game against the Raiders, everybody and their dog was saying, bench this guy. How can you keep putting him out there and trusting him one-on-one? He's just getting destroyed by Waller the entire game. And so I think Yiadom redeems himself. I think he gets a big interception in this one. And I know, which is crazy because he has terrible hands, but I think he actually gets an interception in this one and really sets himself up well for next season.
Definitely. He's got a chance to be the corner. I think you can't go into the season with him as one of the top two guys, but a chance to compete with Bosby for that cornerback 3. The young kind of guy, cheap still, that's probably the way to go. You have Callahan coming back too, but probably still need another vet too, or an early draft pick to round that out. You just need bodies back, or you need talent.
Yep.
So final score, I think the Broncos are going to win this one pretty handily, actually. I think it's going to be a fun game for everybody. I'm going to go Broncos 34 to the Raiders 20.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go Raiders give up their average right there at 27 points. And I'm going to say they score their average right at 20 points. So 27-20.
All right. Well, I hope you're wrong because I want more offense. I just want some explosive I want to be able to look back on the end of the season highlights for Drew Lock and the offense and really just keep coming back to that. Maybe favorite it on my Google page. So that way I can just keep going back to the highlights, and it'd be nice to get a few more in this game. It's good to have them. That win against Detroit was good, but I want more highlights. That's what it's all about. I'm totally vain. I've been lifting only glamour muscles, no substance. I just want the highlights. So you have an interesting question here before we get out of here that I'll kick it off to you to kind of host this segment.
Okay. Well, I just thought, since we're closing out the season here, and I know we're riding a high a little bit on the Broncos, but just looking at the rosters in the AFC West, and you can kind of see a little bit of a trend of where some of these teams are going, but just where would you rank the Broncos if you were ranking the entire AFC West? How would you rank the rosters for 2020? So this is not, this is more looking at the guys that are going to be on the roster for sure. I don't know who each team is going to re-sign. I did include Justin Simmons for the Broncos just because even if they can't get a long-term deal, they're going to tag him. So he's going to be on the roster 2020, no matter what. It takes something crazy happening for him not to be there. So just looking at these rosters, looking at their 2020, who their top players are, how would you rank these teams?
Well, looking at these teams, you kind of threw some names out here. I probably still do have to lean with the Chiefs just because they're in a more established product. It's just the safer bet. But, Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best young quarterback in football. Tyreek Hill, probably the most unique receiving weapon in football. Travis Kelce, a top 2 tight end. And then they complement that, Juwan Thornhill playing well, Frank Clark stepping up as of late. They have a great tackle at Mitchell Schwartz, Mecole Hardman. Tyrann Mathieu brings tenacity and intangibles to that defense. And maybe they'll bring back Chris Jones. You don't have him listed here, but he's one as well. So overall, I'd say it's the Chiefs, probably the safest bet. But Denver, again, we talked about in the last podcast. Maybe this one, they kind of run together when you record 2 in a row. But who knows about the ceiling of this team under Drew Lock? A lot depends on how high Drew Lock can rise. But complemented around them, you have some older veterans here, which we'll see if they're here for the next 2 to 3 years. But Von Miller and Kareem Jackson, definitely safe to say for next year. Duh. Bradley Chubb, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton, Dalton Reisner, Drew Lock. That's all great. Phillip Lindsay and Justin Simmons on top of it. That feels like that should be number 2. And after that, I probably lean to the Raiders instead of the on paper, it looks like the Chargers, actually. I can't believe you included Forrest Lamp, you terrible homer. But Joey Bosa, obviously incredible. Melvin Ingram, very underrated. Casey Hayward, Derwin James, Desmond King, really good units there. And the Raiders, excuse me, probably 4th, but it's just because they have a lot of unknowns. I probably would have included, you do have them here. Josh Jacobs is obviously one, Trent Brown, Max Crosby, Clelin Ferrell. Those are solid building block pieces. We're not sure yet about Trayvon Mullen, cornerback, and they have obviously Derek Carr, but is he going to be there for the next 2 to 3 years? I don't know. So I think it's a toss-up between the Chargers and the Raiders. I think the Chargers are more set with who they have, but the Raiders, because they have a more stable quarterback, I guess the way to look at it, because Phillip Rivers will not be here for the next 2 to 3 years, as well as more capital to do stuff. I think that is the tiebreaker. So I'd rather have the Raiders position than the Chargers, but the Chargers themselves at this very moment have a better core, so to speak. So really, maybe I'm being biased. It's definitely possible, but I feel like the Broncos are in a better position than any of these teams besides the Chiefs, which to me are the obvious number 1.
Right. Well, I mean, they're probably a top 4 team in the NFL right now. So
I mean, you wouldn't hear an argument from me if you thought they were the number 1 team.
Yeah.
They're playing that well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, obviously, Ravens have an argument there. They obviously
Saints,
earned that.
49ers.
Right. There's some teams that have some arguments, but no, it is the Chiefs and then the rest of the division. But I do think the Broncos have a really good case for number 2. I think right now they really do have the second best quarterback situation, which is crazy to say.
In one game, I might take the other guys just because sample size, we have a much better idea, know what we're going to get there. But as far as the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think it is crazy. I think it's Drew Lock.
Yeah.
And that has a bit to do with upside and the contract. But I think that you have to lean that way. I think Drew Lock puts the Broncos in the second best quarterback situation right now.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, they kept talking about it in the broadcast of how the Broncos have the youngest offense in football. The fact that they're just going to keep growing together, that they have pretty much cost control of most of them for the next 3 years together that's just ridiculous. So that offense is going to get a really good chance to grow and turn into something special. It'll be some fun matchups between the Broncos and Chiefs. You might see some of those 35 to 31 kind of scores moving forward.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. The Raiders, their rookie class has been decent, but it's mostly because they just didn't have any talent on the roster.
And we totally forgot, I spaced on this one too, but Jonathan Abram will be back next year. And he went out after that first game against the Broncos, but he was flying around making plays. So he will be
almost
interesting.
put him on our list here.
Yeah.
But I was just going, 1 game sample size is hard to really justify putting him on the list.
Yeah.
But no, and then the interesting thing about the Chargers is most of their top talent is obviously players that are veterans that are on, that they signed to big deals like Melvin Ingram, Keenan Allen, Casey Hayward. And so I'd say, at least youth-wise, the Chargers look like the worst team. They just don't have that young talent. I mean, they have Derwin James, but beyond him, there's just not much that you're looking at and saying, oh my gosh, look at that youth on that team.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. Can you say that thing you said earlier about the Broncos offense and how they're young?
That they are the youngest offense in football?
Oh my gosh. You need to warn me before you talk dirty to me next time. That was oh, man, I'm glad I'm recording alone in my room right now. I'm getting hot.
Got a fan going? Whoo!
I do not. Not yet. I'm going to need to now. I'm taking off my pants. But,
and that's what everybody needed to know.
Yeah, so that's the end of the podcast, folks. It's obviously we've been recording for 2 hours now and got to edit these, but it's the holidays and family's here, so hopefully the sound quality is fine for you guys. We had to kind of jimmy the system a little bit and deal with it, but it's week 17. Everybody's a little dinged up right now and making do, and that's the case for teams. That's the case for us here. I'm dealing with a cold right now, if you can't tell. So hopefully didn't cost too much into the recording. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast, the last one of the regular season. Thank you guys so much for being along on this journey. We love you. Reach out to us on Twitter. We try to be active there. You guys are the reason we do this. We love, Broncos and then Broncos country, the big two reasons that we do this. So we hope you guys enjoyed this season. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you again soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.